Picture this. You are a small girl in a hall of giants. Beeswax and incense thicken the air until it feels like a syrup you must breathe through. Bronze doors groan. Lamplight trembles on gold mosaics, so bright they sting your eyes. The silk at your wrists is soft as water, yet the knot at your ribs might as well be iron. Every footstep echoes, every whisper sounds like a verdict. If you like dark, dignified history that tells the truth without flinching, subscribe and stay with me. These are the stories power prefers we forget. You are Agnes of France, daughter of a king from faraway Paris. You are 9. The sea has carried you east to a city that calls itself the center of the world. They tell you your name will soon be Anna. They tell you your husband is an emperor. You are small enough that the hem of your new robe tangles around your ankles when you try to walk. You are old enough to know that nothing about this is your choice. But then the doors open wider, and Constantinople inhales.
The year is 1180. Manuel Komnenos, the great peacock emperor, has just died. His son, Alexios II, is a boy. The palace smells of resin and damp stone. Your French ladies murmur prayers under their breath in a language no one here understands. Greek courtiers glide like shadows, their voices syrup smooth, their eyes measuring everything. Your fingers trace the cool seam where a mosaic's blue tessera meets gold. You cannot reach the ceiling. You cannot reach home. They take your old name gently away and place a new one on you with the same tenderness as combing your hair. Anna. The syllables are honey and iron. Your wedding to Alexios is a spectacle of restraint. Musicians, a choir, the careful choreography of power. You do not know the creed, but you know the script. Smile when guided, stand when lifted, nod when prompted. You are 9, and your husband is not a man, but a frightened teenager whose hands shake when he touches the gospel book. The patriarch's voice rolls like distant thunder. The candles smoke. The weight of the crown on your hair is a son you cannot bear. You think about the smell of your mother's bread in Paris and understand in one breath that memory will be your only private country. The Regency arranges you both like icons on a shelf, proof that legitimacy can be staged, lit, and paraded. Incense sticks sweet and choking, the scratch of heavy silk at your neck, a ribbon of cold air sliding under the bronze doors. But then, beyond the palace walls, a different procession gathers. The city mutters. It is tired of Latins in the palace and Latin ships in the harbor. It watches a hawk of a man circle from exile, testing the wind. His name is Andronikos Komnenos. He is kin to emperors and enemy to anyone who forgets it. He is old enough to be a grandfather. He has a smile that never reaches his eyes. Legitimacy on paper is brittle. The human body understands power more quickly than words do. You are 9, and yet you can feel a storm long before the men with titles admit it exists. It begins with rumors that move faster than bells. It becomes a smell, smoke. It becomes a sound, a roar that is not one voice, but 1,000. You stare from a window as the harbor boils with masts. People run. A kettle drops on stone. Dogs howl. The air tastes like ash, and the light is wrong. It is the wrong color for a feast day. Andronikos enters the city like a crescendo. He does not knock. He strides across thresholds as if doors exist only to teach wood to fear him. The regent, Maria of Antioch, is Latin. The city hates Latin arrogance as much as it hates taxes. Justice, the new man promises, and the word breaks open into something you wish you could not hear. Sources will later report that the streets ran with hatred that day. You are sheltered, yes, but no curtain can block a scream when a crowd decides who belongs. You curl on the floor while the shutters shake, a child trying to make her body smaller than noise. Andronikos uses grievance like a bridle and rides it straight into the throne room. A city with wounds is a city he can rule. The sting of smoke in your throat, the grit of ash under bare feet, a hard line of sunlight sliding across mosaic saints. But then the doors of your world open again, and the new master is no longer across the city. He is in your house. He arrives smiling, a grandfather's smile, with a lion behind it. He praises your beauty as if describing a vase. He calls you Anna and says the name well. He speaks of order. He speaks of God. He speaks like a man composing history while the ink is still warm. And within days, Alexios is a boy king in name alone. He stands where he is told. He signs what is placed before him. His hands stop shaking. They go numb. It is a mistake to think coups happen all at once. They happen in the body first, in the way people learn not to meet a gaze, in the throat when the words you need cannot get past the fear that lives there now. There will be a second wedding. You hear it like a rumor in your bones. The palace changes tempo. Seamstresses work until the candles puddle. Priests practice voices made of marble. Servants do not look at you when they speak. You are 12 now, tall enough to see over a balcony rail, old enough to notice the way laughter dies when you enter a room. Andronikos is not simply old, he is power made flesh. The city is a net he pulls tight with one hand. He orders scrolls read aloud in the square. He purges enemies with a calm that terrifies wise men into silence. He wants unity. He wants peace. He wants your small hand in his. And the force of that want can rearrange a universe. There is a dress heavy as judgment. There is a scent of rose oil that makes you dizzy. There is the patriarch again, his voice a tide. The old man's fingers are warm. His palm swallows yours. His titles fill the chamber like thunderheads. And the vows, the legal words, the holy words, the cruel words of a city that will say anything not to feel afraid. Anna, he says, softly, as if this tenderness could make the arithmetic decent. 60-something and 12. You feel your body float an inch above itself, a thin defense against a world that refuses to see a child. The marriage is not about affection. It is a chain binding a dynasty to the throat of its future. Your person is the link they pull. The metallic taste of fear, candle smoke caught in hair, the prickle of gold thread biting your wrists where sleeves are too tight. But then, as quickly as vows are spoken, the city begins to learn the price of order. Andronikos governs like a physician who believes pain is the beginning of health. He hunts corruption. He humiliates magnates in public squares. He strips privileges like paint from wood. Some call it justice. Others call it a new cruelty in a familiar costume. You learn to move like water. You learn who can look at you without calculation. You learn which corridors echo less when you are trying not to cry. A child in a palace reads weather better than any admiral. You know who is safe because safety changes the way a man breathes, and you know that a city can adore a new father and still be afraid of him.
The first thing you notice is how quiet the palace becomes when Andronikos thinks. He walks the colonnade with measured steps, hands behind his back, and the servants vanish from doorways like mist. He is old, but he moves like a man who once outran assassins on a midnight road and never forgot the lesson. You watch him from a shaded corner, the way a sparrow watches a hawk. He smiles at you. The smile is real in the small place where it lives. He can be tender. He can also make an order sound like mercy and mean it to be terror. He brings reforms. The tax collectors stop stealing and start fearing. He banishes predators in priestly robes. He does not hesitate to display a warning where the city can see it. Sources will say he was both just and savage, and you will learn how those words can share a bed. In this, you become a student of the oldest subject there is, how power pretends to be a cure while teaching people to live with pain. You begin to measure days by how long you can go without someone speaking to you as if you are a symbol. When the city becomes a theater of punishment, the actors forget they are human. They play their roles too well. The snap of flags in a sea wind, the sour tang of anxiety in your mouth, sunlight shivering on the golden horn like coins. But then, a new rumor climbs the palace steps with bleeding feet. Enemies do not die, they learn to wait. It comes from the west, Normans pressing. It comes from the streets, a name whispered like a prayer and a dare. Isaac Angelos, a man of noble blood whose courage is as much accident as destiny. There is a torchlight night when blades flash too quickly to count. There is a moment when even an old hawk misjudges the wind. Empires die loudly, but they begin to fall in the softest places. In the corners where servants bend to their work. In the kitchens where the cooks whisper. In the rooms where a young woman no one asked watches and memorizes. Because memory is the only wealth she can carry if she must run.
The roar returns. You know it by now. You know the way sound becomes a wall you can lean against. You listen for the pitch of madness in a crowd and hear it climbing. Doors slam, a stool topples in the women's quarters. Distant bells collide with shouting. Someone knocks over an oil lamp and curses. You pray without words. The end of Andronikos is not poetry. It is not even justice. It is the city remembering that it has teeth. You do not see the worst of it. You hear a river of voices moving in one direction and then in many. You smell fear, as if fear had a color. Sources will write that he died by the same spectacle he once used to rule, a mirror no man wants to face. You are 12, almost 13, and old enough to understand that victory and vengeance are cousins who do not always like each other when they meet. You are hidden behind a curtain while history bangs on the door. You do not know if the knock is for you. Regimes change faster than a child can grow. The only constant is that your body remains a treaty no one negotiated with you. Sweat like salt on your upper lip, the rasp of rough linen in your fists, torch smoke crawling along the ceiling like a dark lace. But then, against every law of a world that eats girls first, you survive. They do not kill you. Perhaps because you are useful. Perhaps because they think God is watching. Perhaps because even men who love spectacle flinch at certain optics. You become quiet. You become smaller than your name. You walk where you are told. You listen. You learn the new faces and the new words. You change nothing about your private country. There, your mother still bakes bread in Paris and hums a soft song. There, you own the exact color of the Seine at dusk. Survival at this age is not triumph. It is a discipline. You choose life because life is stubborn. You choose breath because breath can become voice one day, and voice can become a roof. Years curl and break, and you do not drown. Isaac Angelo sits on the throne, then another man, then another. You are a piece of a past that embarrasses the present. They call you Anna. They speak of prudence. They smile and move you across a chessboard that never runs out of squares. You learn to sit without fidgeting in rooms where decisions are made 3 layers above your head. And then the city breaks again. 1204 arrives like a blade through silk. Latin banners bloom on the walls that once taught you how to be small. The church bells speak a language you knew in childhood and now fear. Smoke eats the sky. A horse slips on marble and screams like a person. The smell of pitch climbs the throat and makes even brave men gag. You are not a child. You are a woman with a name that fits. Anna, yes, and Agnes too. Salt and bread, east and west in one body. A soldier with tired eyes stands at your side and does not look away. His name is Theodore Braunus. He has the patience of stone and the scar of a man who has learned to live with the price of loyalty. He asks nothing you cannot give. He offers something no one else has ever placed in your hands, a life that is not a symbol. You feel your shoulders drop for the first time since you left Paris. The slackness hurts. Relief is a pain the body must learn to trust. Marriage can be a weapon. It can also be a shelter. The difference is consent. The clean bite of sea wind on a morning after fire. The rough weave of a plain wool cloak. Bread warm enough to tear with your fingers and eat without ceremony. But then memory arrives, as it always does, and sits beside you like an old friend who refuses to lie. You have lived in palaces and among soldiers' tents. You have had crowns placed on your head and curtains pulled tight to hide you. You were 9, then 12, and the world swallowed those years as if they were crumbs that fell from a table. Now you count time by faces that stayed and hands that did not take something when they touched you. History will write you as a footnote to men. That is how it protects itself. But a footnote can anchor an entire page. And a girl's memory can be a city no army ever learns how to conquer. This is not a fable. It is a record of what a powerful world did to a small person. Because power prefers symbols to souls. The child who arrived in Constantinople as cargo became a woman who learned how to carry herself. The old emperor who took what he wanted found that cities are not cattle. They remember. They return the favor. Between those truths lives the cost. No book balances cleanly. The price is nights you cannot sleep without lighting a candle. The price is looking at your hands and asking what they have been used for by others. The price is learning how to own them again. The lesson, if it can be called that, is simple. There are many kinds of wedlock. Only one is human. It begins where consent begins. It remains where dignity is fed. It ends the moment a child is asked to sign away a future she has not had a chance to imagine. Picture this. Imagine. Then refuse. You wake to the thud of hammers and the gull-scratched cry of a city learning its new language. The window is small. The light is white and hard, as if the sea has filed it to an edge. You smell the day before you see it. Tar, fish opened at dawn, dust from a wall only half a wall now. The voices outside braid French with Greek in harsh, uneven rope. They call you Anna in the streets and Agnes in certain corners where memory is stubborn. You let both names sit on the same bench. The body you live in holds Paris and Constantinople without asking which one should be master. A child was given to a boy. A child was given to an old man. A woman chooses a soldier with quiet eyes and hands that have learned how to be gentle after years of carrying steel. Theodore Branas does not speak like a hero in songs. He speaks like a man who knows the weight of a shield on a long road. You meet him in a courtyard that smells of wet stone and time crushed under sandals. The sky is a shallow bowl. A baker coughs. From somewhere close, a mule stamps and snorts, impatient with human grief. Theodore waits until the silence grows comfortable. Then he bows with an economy that means respect, not performance. You feel the knot at the base of your throat loosen by a finger's width. He did not arrive with the Latin banners. He arrived with a history of standing his ground when the ground moved under everyone else. Some call him a bridge between worlds. Others call him a traitor to one world or the other, depending on the wind. To you, he is a simple fact. He does not look past you to find the emblem you have been forced to be. He looks at your face. He holds the glance the way a father holds a newborn's head. Steady, careful, certain that what he carries matters. The chapel where you stand together smells of beeswax and rain. There are cracks in the floor where the heat of recent weeks split old stone. The candles gutter when a door opens, every flame bowing for a moment to a breeze that tastes of salt. The priest looks older than the arch behind him. He reads the words that have bound and unbound souls for centuries. You have heard marriage words before. You have learned how each syllable can be made to serve a throne or disguise a theft. This time the syllables fall differently. They do not take you from yourself. They make room inside you for a life beginning on purpose. The city is not kind to new beginnings. It suspects anything that looks like joy. It remembers too much. Still, there are afternoons when the harbor quiets and you can hear a rope creak against wood, the ordinary sound of work, and you think, this is what survival tastes like. Bread so fresh the steam fogs your fingers. Water pulled cold from a cistern. A voice you trust murmuring a plan you helped make. A plan that will not turn you back into a symbol by nightfall. Not everyone approves. Some Latins pretend you are a trophy redistributed by a more legitimate hand. Some Greeks pretend a woman loyal to the city cannot love a man who does not curse to new flags on the walls. You learn to ignore certain doors. You learn to knock where the hinges are not rusted with contempt. When you walk in the market, women glance up from their baskets and decide whether to nod. You nod first, with the respect that costs you nothing and returns in quiet ways. A fishwife slices a carp along the spine and says, in a voice lower than the knife, that her cousin saw the emperor's men squander stores meant for widows. You listen. You remember. Memory is how a woman becomes her own archive. Theodore brings news at odd hours. A rider with lice and a terrified horse. A letter with a broken seal. A sailor who cannot keep his hands still. You sit at a table marked with years of hard use and trace the lines of a map that lives only in your head. Here is the road you took by sea when you were 9. Here is the gate the old emperor used, sure that gates loved him. Here is the square where the crowd chose spectacle over mercy, and you learned how thin the floor beneath all of you really is. You press your palm flat on the table and feel the grain. This wood outlasted 3 owners. It bears scars it does not bother to explain. The Latins in the palace know your French better than your Greek. You know their French well enough to hear what they avoid saying. They call you the Queen. They mean the complication. Some of them speak of you as if your decisions must serve the rhythm of their campaigns. You do not shout. You offer what you know at the speed of dignity. If they turn away, the knowledge remains yours until the city needs it again. On certain evenings, the wind slides along the colonnades and brings you a smell from the past. Resin, the old incense that climbed your throat when you tried not to cry. It does not unmake you now. It is only a smell. You step out into a courtyard where the light spills like melted brass. A boy chases a dog. The dog wins. You laugh once, quick, astonished to learn that laughter is not a betrayal of the dead. Theodore returns after weeks away. His cloak is stiff with salt. His beard has gone to iron at the edges. He sets down his sword and touches the table like a traveler greeting an old friend. He talks of villages that bartered barley for safety, of priests who kept open a school in the lee of a ruined wall, of women who led men out of traps because they were the only ones who could see past panic. You listen until the fire settles in its bed and the sticks are red bones. You put your hand over his. The scars do not frighten you. They read like a book about adult truths. There are nights when the city roars again, and you smell pitch, and you hear the hoof fall of fear. You remember how quickly a day can become a verdict. You gather a few things that have always been yours. A small cross made for you in Paris. A ribbon your mother tied in your hair the day you left. A scrap of velvet saved from a dress that was never yours in any real sense, but taught you how to carry weight. You keep them in a linen bag at the foot of the bed not because you plan to flee, but because you respect the law of storms. They do not ask permission. They arrive, and you are either ready or not. A messenger comes from the palace with a request that is not a request. Appear at a feast. Smile. Allow yourself to be seen. You dress in a gown that does not shine so brightly it insults hungry men. The room hums with the noise of people pleased with their own importance. Goblets clink. A roast turns on a spit. The fat hisses and spits back. A troubadour sings a song about bravery that has never seen a battlefield. You remain until the hour that honors the invitation and then leave by a small door that gives onto a corridor where the stones remember the footsteps of older times. Outside, the air is cold and clean. You breathe. For a woman who was once a page in other men's books, the act of choosing when to leave is a luxury so sharp it almost hurts. News arrives from the countryside that makes the city hold its breath. Defeat where victory was certain. The road to Adrianople a ledger of mistakes and luck turned cruel. You feel the floor tilt. You have been here before. You have learned what to do when the story threatens to swallow the people inside it. You go to the kitchens. You speak to the women who feed soldiers. You ask how many mouths have been counted and how many have been missed. You send men you trust to stand near the warehouse doors. You ask for a list of monasteries that sheltered refugees the last time a banner fell. You do not wait for permission. You do what needs doing, not because the city will thank you, but because you live here and intend to keep living. Night presses against the windows. The wind throws a handful of rain at the tiles. The city curls on itself like a cat in a draft. You remember your first night in this place. the bronze doors deep as drums, the gold that hurt to look at. You remember the old man's hand closing over yours at the altar, and the way the room seemed to narrow around that point of contact until there was no air left. You close your eyes and let the memory pass through as if it were weather. It is weather. It comes. It goes. You remain. On the morning after a defeat, the city tastes like iron. Men talk too loudly. Women lower their voices until the sense of their words is a secret kept for those who hung the washing before sunrise. You and Theodore walk along a wall that survived when other walls did not. He looks to the horizon for dust. You look down to the alleys for signs that people have chosen to stay. A bread line that holds its shape, a nurse boiling cloth, a boy with a basket larger than his chest, learning to sell figs and not to run. You write a letter to a woman you met years ago when a marriage was only a word in a man's mouth. She lives now beyond the city, in a place where the hills fold into one another and the wind learns to whisper instead of howl. You tell her that you are well. You say it twice because sometimes the hand only believes the heart after repetition. You ask if the olive harvest kept its promise. You sign with both names and feel no need to choose. One afternoon, a child tugs your sleeve. She holds out a tiny icon painted on a chip of wood. The gold has been scratched away by time. The saint's face is gentle. She tells you her father found it under a fallen beam and says you should keep it because you looked at her the way people ought to look at saints, like they mean something without having to prove it. You take the icon. It smells of smoke and sap. You put it in your bag with the ribbon and the velvet and the cross, a little assembly of objects that witnessed you coming back to yourself. Theodore stands in the doorway watching you arrange a smaller life inside a life that always threatens to become too large. He smiles, a small thing that warms a cold room. You think of the boy who signed papers with a hand that would not stop shaking, and of the old man who could make the word justice blush with shame. You think of those days and do not let them own the present. The stove ticks as it cools. Outside, the city decides to sleep. But then the bells roll again, tide over tide, and the harbor answers with light where there should be darkness. Fires leap along the curve of the sea like someone scored the night and set a fuse. Theodore is gone before the echo finishes. You follow, not to swing a blade, but to stand where a voice like yours can tip a decision that might have cost 100 lives. The smoke tastes like the end of patience. A warehouse burns. A rumor runs ahead of the flames. Someone blames someone else. You find the two men whose anger could break a district and place your palm on a barrel that has not yet caught. The hoop creaks. You say their names until their fathers return to their faces. They blink. They lower their shoulders. The knight steps back from the edge it was about to jump. Later, when the fire is only a ring of heat in the wet ash, a Latin captain with a scar down his cheek that does not look honorable speaks to you in your mother's language. He thanks you without smiling. He wants to say more and does not know how. You nod once, not out of pride, but because a nod is the shortest bridge between people who must live together whether they like it or not. In the mornings after nights like this, you sit in a room that smells of wet wool and rosemary and make lists. Lists of things to mend, lists of people to feed, lists of streets that need stones set back into place so carts do not snap axles and leave grain to sprout in puddles. You grew up under domes painted with saints. You learned to live under ceilings where smoke stains map the hard truth. People survive because they do the small work no one writes down. When spring comes, it is almost an insult. The apricot trees bloom with a zeal that feels like mockery after the winter you had. You touch a petal. It is softer than silk. The scent is faint and clean. You let the insult slide into gratitude. You pour water at their roots. You speak a blessing your mother taught you, and another you learned here, words knitted together without tearing either thread. A trader from the west brings cloth the color of morning fog, and stories the color of wine. He speaks of kings who believe the East is a prize that can be hung around a neck. He does not understand that this place is a living thing with a memory and a will. You let him talk. When he pauses for breath, you ask the one question that cuts the story to bone. Who will carry the bitter water when the banners have moved on? He has no answer. He sells his cloth and thinks of something else. On a quiet day, you and Theodore walk to a church that has lost its doors. Inside, the light falls in a way that forgives people for what they have done in the name of fear. The mosaics have survived. A saint lifts a hand. A fish gleams where a piece of gold should have fallen out long ago. You kneel. Your knee hurts where you fell on stone as a girl. You tell the truth without spectacle. You have been used. You have been kept. You have been asked to smile with a mouth that did not feel like yours. You have been loved, and the love did not ask you to pretend. Theodore kneels beside you and does not speak. The quiet has shape. It holds. When you rise, the world feels no lighter. It feels possible. That is enough. The first rain after a long dry spell arrives like apology. It freckles the dust, lifts the smell of old straw from the stables, and slicks the flagstones until children skid and shriek with the joy of not falling. You stand beneath a gallery where vines tangle through the wooden lattice and watch a baker slide loaves out of the oven with a paddle longer than your arm. The crusts crackle. Steam purls upward and hides his face for a heartbeat. When it clears, his smile has the bruised look of a man who has learned to be grateful for small things because large ones do not often favor him. A city healed by hunger is always tender around the ribs. The Latin court counts sacks, not souls. The Greek guilds count favors, not sacks. Between the columns where plans usually go to die, you insist that bread is a language, and if people are fed, they can listen again. Letters go out with seals that still impress even those who refuse to bow to the new banners. The wax smells of resin and bees. The ink smells metallic, like the taste of a bitten lip. Names are addressed carefully with the respect that does not humiliate. In return, carts arrive. Coarse flour from villages that trust your signature more than the emperor's. Barley from monasteries where the abbot cannot be bullied, but can be persuaded by a dignified woman who remembers his niece's name. Theodore reads dispatches by lamplight, his thumb smoothing the crease of each page as if words could be made less sharp by touch. He shows you a note that says a garrison is 2 days from running out of oil and patience. You send olive tins from a church's storeroom and 3 boys who grew up within the sound of those soldiers' boots and can remind them that the city still knows their mothers. While the generals rehearse victories in rooms perfumed with wine, you make lists with the dry, steady calm of someone who has learned that a street without bread will tear down a palace without pausing to argue theology. The court tests you. It always will. A count with a nose like a beak and a taste for parading mercy asks you to smilingly endorse a levy that will take wheat from Greek stores and send it to Flemish tables. You do not raise your voice. You ask to see the lists. You stand where the windows open onto a square where pigeons braid the air, and you read the columns of figures until the count blinks. You draw your finger down, slow as a blade sliding back into its sheath, and point to a number that does not reconcile with the number 3 lines later. You ask him to explain where the wheat walked. Silence lifts like a curtain. The smell of rain on hot stone, of clay roof tiles cooling, of tallow candles beginning their final tilt toward sleep. When the count does not answer, you say in a voice as ordinary as water, "Let us take enough so no one starves, and leave enough so no one must steal." It is not a threat. It is the arithmetic of survival. A scribe copies the order with a hand that shakes only a little. The count bows, a stiff hinge in need of oil. Outside, the baker's paddle slides beneath another row of loaves, and for one perfect instant, the blossom of steam looks like forgiveness. Word carries more swiftly than carts. Women who keep soup simmering on embers that never die 3 streets from freezing begin to greet you with the nod that means, today the pot will not be scraped to smoke. A fishwife presses into your palm a sardine wrapped in fig leaf and says nothing. The silent gift is a story in itself. You unwrap it on a bench when no one is watching. The salt hits your tongue. Wind stirs the rosemary growing through a crack in the stone. You think of all the tables where people perform appetite because to admit hunger would be to admit fear. And you decide that every decision you make must be humble enough to survive the kitchen. From the palace comes a summons written in a hand that pretends to be casual. Attend at dusk, sit beneath a tapestry where a lion is forever crushing a snake, and say aloud that you support a rationing plan already drawn. The room is thick with the smell of wet wool. Goblets ring like small bells. You feel the old instinct to stand exactly where you are told and to lower your eyes. The old instinct does not win. You request that the plan be read line by line. You ask questions with the same rhythm you use to count the beat of your pulse when fear presses a hand against your mouth. Your voice does not tremble. The last time it trembled, a grandfatherly emperor smiled while you drowned in a crowd of titles. When the reading is done, you do not gloat. You simply ask that a clause be added. The people who bake are to be paid before the people who praise. It is not eloquent, it is correct. The change is made, the room breathes again. The lion in the tapestry goes on killing his snake because tapestries are honest about how often victory is a loop that never ends. Later, in the quiet that follows rooms, Theodore peels an orange with his pocket knife. The peel folds back from the fruit in one long spiral. The knife flashes. The pith smells bitter and clean. He offers you a segment. The juice runs over your knuckle. He asks if the day cost you. You say that everything worth keeping exacts a price. The question is whether you recognize the coin. A messenger arrives after moonrise. His boots leave mud commas across the floor. He whispers in Theodore's ear. You see in the change of his eyes that the world has tipped again. The rumor is not a rumor. It has a date and place. A force under a western banner lost horses and nerve on a plain where reeds hid more men than the map allowed. The name Adrianople moves like a knife inside the city's mouth. The taste of iron returns. You send for the baker. You send for the fishwife. You send for the boy who knows which alley allows carts to slip past a levee no one is enforcing. The bell in a church that no longer has doors tolls to a rhythm that means come without questions. The rain stops. The night smells of smoke, and under it, faint but present, the sweetness of bread pulled just at the point where crust is dark enough to resist the blade and crumb bright enough to promise tomorrow. In the half-sleep that follows, your hands remember other rooms, other summonses, other masks. Your body flinches and then calms when a cart creaks past. The city's heart keeps time beneath your window. You listen. You think. If we get through this, it will not be because men with titles are clever. It will be because mothers kept children from panic long enough to eat. The road east is a ribbon of dirt scabbed over with broken shell. Wind combs the fields flat. Crows stitch the sky with the careless grace of creatures who have never feared a seal-topped letter. You ride in a cart rather than on a horse because a woman who has known too many saddles learns to protect the spine that keeps her upright. The cart smells of onions and leather and the peculiar wool sweat of blankets that have seen every kind of weather. Soldiers pass, some with faces you recognize, most with the same exhausted gaze that aims forward, because looking to the side costs a man the last of his courage. Theodore rides ahead with a small company whose shields speak a language anyone on any road can read. We are not looking for a fight, but we have names to go home to. He tells you to remain in the city. You refuse with the calm that has more weight than tantrum. You say you will stop where stopping keeps panic from catching fire. This is not heroics, it is craft. You have learned the shape of crowds the way a midwife learns the sounds a woman must make before the child can breathe. The closer you get, the more the air remembers sweat and trampled grass. The first thing people tell you is wrong. The second thing is worse. The third thing is the truth that no one in a fine room will say aloud until it is safe to be wise. The Western horsemen rode like kings and found out how reeds can lie. A wave of men on small, quick mares bent the field to their will. The clash came where the ground was soft and the pride was hard. The emperor fell into a trap built of patience and dust. A banner vanished. A crown changed hands without ceremony. Somewhere between reeds and rumor, a great man became a prisoner. You taste metal in your mouth and know it is not blood. It is the body's way of taking stock. At a monastery on a hill, the bell hangs at a confused angle. The courtyard holds a tremor of recent feet. Children sleep in the angles of doorways. 3 women stand as if they have stood all day. They smell of smoke and milk turned with fear. You ask what they need. They do not say water or bread. They say someone to tell the truth so the men will stop swinging at phantoms. You climb a stair whose stone treads have been grooved by centuries of monks carrying the same load, and look out over a land that has learned again that maps are promises made by people who do not intend to keep them. Word must be moved without making it a weapon. You speak to a captain whose beard is a thatch of indecision. You speak to a priest who has forgotten that God is not a ledger. You speak to the boy who knows every ditch between here and yesterday. You say that rumors must be broken like stale bread and shared, otherwise they choke. You say that a leader caught is not a world ended. You say the carts will follow the river and the river will forgive the carts because it always has. A wind comes that smells of marsh and the almost sour scent of horses that have run too far. You remember how, years ago, you were told to smile in a room where a man's will was law, and your air was his to distribute. You close your eyes, then open them on purpose. The field below is stippled with tents and the stubborn light of cooking fires that refuse to learn despair. You think of the baker's paddle and the fishwife's skift and the rope that creaked against a mast on a morning when you thought the world might remember how to be ordinary. A rider arrives with a letter from men who would rather negotiate with paper than with grief. They request your presence at a council of those who call themselves the city's guardians. The parchment smells of damp. The wax seal is cracked in one corner, as if the authority barely holds. You go because you must. The hall they have borrowed is an echo chamber of people trying to speak in sentences when a scream might be more honest. They praise you before they listen to you. You do not bow. You tell them that walls without bread are theater sets. You tell them that every soldier who arrives with a story must leave with oil, with rope, with a piece of news that will not change when the wind does. One of them, a noble whose rings click against the table as he speaks, proposes that Greek stores be searched and seized to feed Latin camps, in gratitude for their protection. The room waits for your answer as if a hinge waits for a door. You ask quietly what gratitude looks like when a woman has nothing left but the pot her mother used to boil lentils in a winter older than this trouble. He blusters, then softens. He says that necessity is a stern tutor. You say dignity is sterner. The decision is deferred. You arrange for the deferral to last long enough that reality itself will render it moot. In the margin of crisis, you do the work that saves more lives than speeches ever will. You arrange a lane for carts that carries vinegar, because wounds must be cleaned, even when victory will not sing about those who did the cleaning. You find 2 monks with practical faces and put them in charge of distributing linen, because bandages handed out by men who prefer counting to touching will be gone before the next horn blows. You tell the steady girl who never looks directly at anyone because she is too tired for eye contact, that she is now responsible for lighting the hearth in the room where the lost will come to learn they are only misplaced. Night falls with a soft slap of cold against the skin. The reeds click their teeth. A fox screams once and is done. The fire in the monastery yard smokes like a candle that refuses to die. Theodore returns in the hour when a man looks most like himself. Dust stakes his cheeks. Blood darkens one sleeve at the elbow. It is not his. He smells of horse and rain. He tells you that retreat has become a kind of wisdom, and that for once the proud remembered it in time. He asks what you need him to do. You tell him to sleep where soldiers can see he trusts the dark. He laughs, the single bark of a man who has known nights that did not end. He lies down with his back to the wall, and within breaths is gone, to a place where the body mends itself, 1 stitch at a time. You stay awake because the city has taught you that a woman's watchfulness sometimes holds more than a garrison does. You think of the boy who ascended a throne he could not see over, of the old man who turned vows into a chain, of the day when smoke covered the mosaics with a veil, and you decided to live. A moth batters itself against a lantern, then learns. A donkey yawns, teeth big as a moral. Somewhere a mother sings in a voice that cannot afford to break. Dawn scours the mistakes of night, but leaves their outlines so no one forgets. The world smells of damp earth and cooling ash and the tannic bite of tea brewed too long in a cracked pot. The men in the hall look less like lords and more like people. You see this and speak to the people, not the lords. You ask them to imagine this city as a house. You ask what a house does first when it has been shaken. It checks the hearth, the door, the well. They nod because almost all of them have known houses that shake. You send them to the hearths, the doors, the wells. They return with lists, not speeches. By noon you have the numbers you need. By dusk carts roll. By moonrise, a man who promised to seize what was not his sends a note indicating he will accept carefully counted gifts. You take a breath you did not know you were withholding. It tastes of onion, smoke, and the faint sweetness of a quince someone left to ripen on a sill. The crisis is not over. It never is. But the edge has tucked itself back, and you know enough to be grateful for edges that do not cut when you brush past them.
When the wind shifts, the city smells like copper. When the wind tires, it smells like laundry that did not quite dry. You come to understand that peace is not an accord, it is a routine. You learn the hours when a certain street goes kind, the days when a certain quarter is best avoided because the men who drink there do not intend to, but will make grief into an excuse. You spend coins at stalls that do not flatter you, and sit where old women play at remembering on purpose. You trade stories instead of favors. It works better. It lasts longer. The house you and Theodore keep is not a palace. It is a place. The lintel has a crack that looks like a river. The shutters stick when it's humid. The hearth smokes when the wood is jealous of its own heat. There are 3 rooms where there were 2, because space can be coaxed into generosity if a carpenter loves his tools. In the back, a courtyard contains a fig tree that produces more than anyone expects the year a drought should have killed it. You tie a blue ribbon to a branch to tempt luck to keep what it has started. On mornings when the harbor is glass, Theodore sits with his boots unlatched and mends a strap by the door. The sun pulls the smell of the sea into the room.
A fly performs furious orbits around the rim of his cup. He drinks and winces, and drinks again. He asks if you slept. You say yes when you have not. He knows and does not insist. Love is a discipline, not a theater. Later you go to a market where a woman from Pontus sells almonds so fresh they squeak between teeth. You buy more than you need because the sound reminds you of childhood, and sometimes a day can be saved by something as small as that. The city's rulers, with their banners and catalogues of injuries, remember you when they need a signature that carries both east and west in its stroke. You give it when giving means saving a street from soldiers who are hungry and bored. You refuse when refusal is the last remaining instrument of dignity. Men who have never been told no recover from it like a patient recovering from fever, slowly, with much sweating, and more politeness afterward. A day comes when a delegation arrives from the palace with a document that elevates Theodore to a title that will keep him near the center of every storm. They drape phrases over his shoulders like chain. You can hear the weight even if the words are light. He looks at you over the heads of men who wait to see whether he will feel larger. He feels heavier. You nod the yes that says, we can make something honest out of this if we refuse to forget how to sweep a threshold. That evening you sweep it yourself. Dust, straw ends, a feather small as a breath. The broom handle is smooth from years of hands. The sound is its own kind of music. A boy from the kitchen runs past and trips and does not fall. You reach for him out of habit, and he's already steady. Lady, he says without stopping, the pot boiled over and the beans still won't soften. You tell him to add a handful of salt and wait. Some things only yield when reminded they are part of the world. Letters arrive like weather, some with the dry crackle of early frost, some heavy with the damp of summer storms. One is from a woman you helped find her son the night the city could not decide whether to roar or sleep. She writes that he has taken a wife who laughs with her whole face, and that they named the first child for a saint who never learned Latin. She includes a sprig of dried thyme. When you open the letter, the room smells like hills under a high sun. You think of the alleys that tried to swallow you when you were young, and the rooms that tried to keep you when you were older, and you say aloud to no one, there are many ways to win. On the day of your name day, both names, you make a feast of what is possible. Bread with the crackly crust, cheese that sweats on the platter as if embarrassed by its richness, olives that shine like wet pebbles in a child's hand. You invite the priest who never forgot to bless the loaves first. You invite the woman who once slid a sardine into your palm. You invite the baker. You look for the fishwife and learn she moved away when a cousin sent for her from a town where the river still forgives nets. You lift a cup and say the blessing in both languages, and the room goes quiet in that deep way that means people feel seen. Not everything keeps. A petition you wrote with more hope than leverage returns with a notation so smug you have to put the paper down and wash your hands to rid them of the feel of it. A young captain you believed would outgrow his arrogance does not. A gang widens its grip on a street where mothers teach their children to cut through courtyards rather than risk the main road. You meet with the council of those who can decide where the night watch will stand, and you speak until the shape of your own voice tires you. They promise, they forget, you go back. You select your words like a mason picks stones from a pile. You build without adornment. By weekend, the watch stands where it should. On your way home, you step over a puddle that was once a hole and think about the minutes of life saved by small stones set well. Sometimes the past comes to the door. A noblewoman, veiled so heavily that only the pattern of her steps gives her away, appears at twilight. She smells of lifted perfume and fear. In a room where the shutters are latched, she tells you in a rush that a man with a famous name means to marry her niece to someone who collects titles, the way grandmothers collect buttons. The niece is 13. The name is currency. The bargain offends the bone. You listen. You serve tea brewed light. You say you will write the words that can make a man hesitate when his greed is in a hurry. You do. You choose the salutation that touches the last scrap of honor you think he still owns. He hesitates. The niece lives the year. The year becomes 2. By the time the man remembers his appetite, the girl has become old enough to speak for herself. On a clear night, thin as paper, you walk to the sea. The moon floats like silver hammered flat. Boats tick against one another, a soft conversation after a long day. The city is a quilt of light and unlit. Somewhere a singer tries a line and cannot find the note he wants. You miss Paris for one breath, the memory of bread with a crust your teeth understood before you did. Then Constantinople inhales, the smell of salt and the faint mineral scent of marble warmed all day, and you feel the truth that has made you who you are. You are 2 names, and both of them mean the same thing when spoken with respect. When you come home, Theodore is bent over a map that is more scar than plan. He looks up, and his mouth curves the way it does when his heart smiles before his face can keep up. He opens his hand. In it is a ring found during repairs at an old gate, gold dulled to the color of old wheat. It is not a royal thing. It is a human thing. He asks if you will wear it when you walk among people who insist that a person is a flag. You take the ring. It smells faintly of the oil he uses to keep his knife from rusting. It slides over your knuckle and finds a home. The metal warms with your heat. The past does not burn you. It brightens enough to see by. The city sleeps hard the night a storm finally breaks after weeks of holding back. Rain rattles the tiles like pebbles thrown by a bored child. Lightning stitches the sky with venom and then forgets the insult. In the morning, the fig leaves shine as if someone has thought to polish them. A neighbor's rooster remembers his job. A cartwheel squeals. Someone curses. Someone laughs. You write a letter to a friend you will never meet, a girl you imagine across time who has been told that her body is a treaty she must agree to without reading it. You tell her that the treaty can be set on fire. You tell her that bread tastes better when the hand that breaks it is your own. A ship noses into the harbor with a flag that does not belong here and never has. The cloth is the pale blue of a winter sky over bare vineyards. The gulls curse it. The wind plays with it. On the quay, a clerk with ink on his fingers says the word you have not heard spoken with authority since you were a girl who could not see over a balcony rail. France. Men in bright cloaks step onto the stones as if the city were a painted backdrop for their errand. Their boots ring in an unfamiliar rhythm. They smell of horse balm and a perfume that tries too hard to be orange blossom. One carries letters sealed with a device that pinches your chest the way a string tightens a lute. It is the old crest, without the old hand behind it. Your brother's court, far away, suddenly present in the salt and glare of this shore. They ask for the Lady Agnes. The name hangs in the air like a bell struck once and left to sing. For a breath you are 10 again, and the bronze doors are taller than the sky. For the next breath you are the woman who survived those doors. You answer in French and watch the men straighten with relief. Their language has found a home. You offer wine watered just enough to refresh. The cups sweat. The table smells faintly of resin and last summer's figs. The letters are polite and full of careful ignorance. They ask after your health. They speak of alliances as if they were baskets passed along a line of women at harvest. They suggest that a visit would please people who remember a child sent east for the good of 2 crowns. The words do not mention old vows or old wounds. The margins are empty and loud with what is not said. You take the messengers to a church where the candles burn low and the floor is warm from late sun. The lamps hum. The priest keeps his distance. You tell the visitors a version of the truth that honors both your names. You say you were given, and you endured, and you chose. You say the city is your language now as much as theirs ever was. You say your husband is a man who has made himself from service rather than spectacle. You do not show them the bag at the foot of your bed, where a ribbon and a cross and a scrap of velvet keep a quiet court. One of them remembers you as a child who could not keep the sleeves of her robe from slipping over her fingers. He smiles at the memory and then bites his lip, ashamed. The sound of regret is small and precise. It clicks like a pearl dropped onto stone. You take pity, and you do not take it as a debt. You tell him where to find bread that tastes as it did when Paris was the world. Later he will send a small packet of almond sweets and a note that says only, "For the road you chose." You send a letter back across the sea. You write by lamplight while the window breathes cool air into the room and the fig tree tick-clicks its leaves. Your words are neat and steady. You thank those who remembered. You tell them you are well and mean it. You describe the harbor in a sentence that smells like tar and lemon rinds and the wet wool of fishermen's cuffs. You do not ask for anything. A woman who has reassembled her life from ash and mercy learns that asking is a skill, not a reflex. The ship weighs anchor at dawn. Ropes creak. Men shout in voices that are too loud because they are leaving and the sea wants attention. You stand in the corridor where stone remembers footsteps and watch the flag diminish. The taste in your mouth is clean, like rain caught in a bowl set out before evening. You were a French princess. You are a Byzantine woman. You have learned that both truths can live in one body without fighting. At noon, Theodore returns from the walls with dust at his cuffs and a look that tells the shape of the morning without words. He reads the empty harbor and the set of your shoulders. He nods. You sit together with bread hot enough to hurt your fingers and talk of repairs the city needs before winter. You count nails and shingles and jars of oil. The world narrows to what can be done. The world broadens to include everything that isn't fear. You think, not without tenderness, of the girl who left Paris in a dress she could not carry. You do not want to be her again. You do not want to punish her either. She did what she had to breathe in a room that used breath as a weapon. You take another piece of bread and hold it in both hands until the heat spreads into your palms. You have work. Work is the dignity that cannot be confiscated. Sometimes at dusk you hear a tune from a tavern, a scrap of a song you knew before your hairpins learned to bite. It comes thin as thread. It crosses the water in a line so fragile a breath could break it. You hum 2 notes, then you stop. You are not turning away from your first home. You are letting it sit in the chair beside you without insisting that it bring you back to a table that no longer exists. At court, a Latin lord pretends not to know the name Agnes because he is tired of maps that do not obey him. You do not correct him. You speak in Greek with a patience that wears well. The room listens. A flame pops and spits a bead of resin onto the stone. The Lord blinks as if something small and stinging had chosen his eye. He nods. He marks down a promise he will remember to keep this time. You leave by the small door when the hour is proper. The corridor smells of beeswax and the ghost of incense. The city breathes out, alive in every broken place.
The night after the French sail, rain passes through without settling. You and Theodore stand under the eave and watch the street shine in stripes where the gutters have learned their job. You say, "He will read the letter and know I am not a ghost." Theodore says, "You have not been a ghost since you decided to eat what you want at the hour you prefer." The joke is small and accurate. You laugh. The eve drips like a rosary, counting down the last of the storm. In the morning, a girl you know from the market brings you a basket of quince and a question wrapped in a kerchief. Her cousin faces a marriage that would please men who count dowries like coins, but would reduce the girl to a shadow. You read the lines and hold the fabric to your nose. It smells of laundry boiled clean and sun-dried until stiff. You write the words that can set a delay like a wedge and give a child time to grow into a voice. You remember the day you had none. You remember, and you do not let the memory make you hard. It makes you precise. When the answer comes, it is not a triumph. It is a pause. It is enough. The girl will wait the year. A year is a lifetime when you are 13. A year is also a season when you are a city. You send the basket back with 2 pieces of advice that are not written but will be understood. Keep your eyes level. Keep bread in the house. The messengers who carried your letter home will tell a story about a woman who speaks 2 languages like they are both her first. They will say she is quiet, and her quiet moves rooms. They will say she walked them through a market where fish still flip in tubs of water and bread lifts under cloth like a child breathing in sleep. They will say the city is not what they thought it was. They will say it smelled like rain and hot stone and something green they could not name. When they say your name, they will choose the one you used when you gave them the bread. You light a candle for the road they took. The wax creeps toward your knuckles. The flame swims when air moves in the room. The wick glows red as a pomegranate seed. In the old days, you were lit and moved by other hands. In these days, you set your own light and choose how long it burns. You are still a symbol in some mouths. You are still a complication in some plans. You are also a person who knows where the city keeps its strength. It lives in kitchens and in the habit of listening before deciding. It lives in the decision to keep a bag packed not to run, but because foresight is a kind of love. It lives in the quiet of a room where 2 names have learned to sit without jostling for the chair with the better view. When the moon lifts like a shallow bowl over the sea, you stand on the roof and breathe the night. Smoke, salt, the faint sweetness of figs ripening faster than you expected. Somewhere, a door bangs and is set gently back in its frame. You think of the old emperor who taught a city to fear, and the crowd that taught him how fear ends. You think of the boy who signed papers with a hand that trembled, and the way the room stopped trembling when it no longer contained him. You think of a soldier who learned patience and brought it home as a gift. Then you think of nothing at all, and let the air rest in your lungs as if it had been made for you. Sometimes you still wake with the shout in your throat, the one you swallowed 100 times to keep someone else's peace. You sit up. You drink water that tastes like stone and a little iron. You listen to the house talking to itself in the deep hours. A beam settles. A frog croaks from the garden jar. You lie back and speak 1 word for each name and sleep again. There is something like happiness in this. It does not look like the pictures painted for girls in places where men wear crowns. It looks like a table with scratches that tell a history. It sounds like a street where a woman who has carried too much finds that 1 sack has been lifted from her shoulder by hand she trusts. It tastes like bread torn with fingers. It feels like a ring that has grown warm enough that you forget it once belonged to someone else. You do not forget anything that matters. You refuse to let forgetting be the price of peace. Mini-reflection. The life taken from you became a life you made and guarded. Power will always test its own weight against your bones. You learned how to lean and not break, how to set terms with a hand that does not shake, how to be two names and one dignity.
The older you get, the more the city sounds like a loom. Shuttles pass, threads tighten, patterns emerge where there was only repetition. Morning gives you warm tile under bare feet, and the snap of a laundry line tugging at its knots. Noon gives you arguments about grain disguised as theology. Evening gives you the soft violence of weather arriving over water and deciding whether to stay. Women come to your door with problems the size of kingdoms compressed into the size of a kitchen. A boy has found a knife and thinks it is a door. A widow has learned the price of refusing to laugh at a joke that chose her as the punchline. A girl has been promised where she does not wish to go. You do not promise miracles. You offer words that open small spaces. You offer lists that require men to act like neighbors instead of lords. You offer the kind of silence in which a woman can hear the sound of her own mind turning. You keep notes the way a steward keeps keys. There are marks in your ledger that only you can read. A dot beside a name means a debt remembered and not yet called. A line means a promise kept. An asterisk means a child whose story you should ask after the next time the mother comes for barley. The book smells like smoke and old glue. Its leather creaks when you open it. It holds a city's unofficial history in strokes that will never be copied into a chronicle and will never be lost as long as women speak to each other. There are days when the Latin court wants you at their table because they need their decrees to sound like sense. The hall gleams with imported polish. The lamps burn too bright and too long. You sit and hear a plan that confuses punishment with policy. You speak softly until people lean forward. When they lean, you name the cost they prefer not to count. The cost is always held by someone who will not be invited to the victory feast. If anyone looks at you as if this were an inconvenience, you wait until the discomfort serves its purpose. It usually does. A rumor arrives with dust on its boots. It says a great lord from the west will winter in the city. It says he will bring a train of mouths that must be fed and songs that cannot be translated. You do not panic. You count. You talk to the baker who knows what flour can be stretched without turning bread into a memory. You talk to the sailors who can carry lentils cheaply during a month when winds cut their throats less cruelly. You talk to women who know how to turn onion and stale barley into something that can sustain a man long enough to think better thoughts. Power comes and goes. Pots keep boiling. Sometimes, alone, you go to stand before a mosaic that survived hands and fire and the sort of rain that enters a building as if it had paid for the right. The saint looks past you with a gaze that has learned to outlast fashion. Gold tesserae lose their gleam and then remember it when the light moves. You stand very still and let the room tell its story. It says, endurance is not a trick. It is a choice repeated until it hardens into nature. You are not a saint. You are a woman who remembers. You remember being set like an ornament on ceremonies that would outlive you if you let them. You remember a boy whose fear was honest and an old man whose determination felt like weather. You remember the day when the city decided its patience had been mistaken for consent and corrected the error in a chorus that left no room for argument. You remember a soldier who opened a life for you without insisting that it be new to count. The recollection does not sting. It warms. It has the quality of light passing through oil on water, bright and uncertain, then settling. A visitor, thin and precise as a quill pen, brings a question in Latin and a faint aura of libraries. He asks for memories of the last komnenoi. He wants to fix the dates of vows and deaths. He wants the ages of children and the order of storms. He wants to know whether the city burned more fiercely in grief or rage when Andronicus fell. You tell him what can be told without claiming to have stood in the center of every circle. You use the verbs that protect truth from certainty. Sources report. Chronicles allege. Accounts suggest. He writes, surprised and pleased that there exists a woman who carries years the way scribes carry wax tablets. He thanks you with a small bow and the gift of a packet of saffron wrapped in linen. The linen smells like rosemary. The saffron will make a feast of an ordinary pot of rice on a winter night.
A girl you helped years ago returns with a child on her hip. The child stares as if your face were a puzzle she is determined to solve. You offer a finger. She grips it with the fierce decisiveness of people who have not yet learned to doubt. Her small hand is warm and damp. You feel a line inside you go slack and then strong, like a rope that has stopped being pulled in opposite directions. The girl laughs and tells you her life has become ordinary in the right ways. She says the man she married passes bread before he speaks. She says the street where she lives smells of yeast and clean sheets. The report is better than any oath. Once in a long while, someone asks about the old emperor who married a child to prove he had become God's favorite. You answer without color. You say he governed with a passion for order that tasted like fear. You say he loved justice until it learned to fear him. You say a city is not a court, and it remembers. You say the end was as terrible as the means, and this is how these stories are often written when men decide to teach a lesson with a body. The questioner nods and insists on pity or scorn. You refuse both. You offer comprehension that does not excuse. It is the only offering that does not lie. When you are sick, it happens quietly. A fever with edges. Dreams that climb into your bed and do not leave when you wake. Theodore sits at the edge of the mattress and peels an apple in a long strip. The strip coils like a sleeping snake. He feeds you small slivers. They taste like a cool morning in a year before you knew the word coup. A neighbor woman brings a cloth that has been soaked in vinegar and lavender. She wrings it out and lays it on your brow with hands that know how to be sure without being rough. The room dims and brightens. The fig tree outside rasps its leaves together as if praying. You breathe and count back from 10 in both languages. When the fever breaks, the air tastes like stone after rain. You are still here. You decide to make a small school for girls whose names do not appear on lists. You borrow a room and fill it with benches rescued from a warehouse where no one remembered they had a use. You teach sums and letters and the art of listening for the thing a person does not say. You show them how to write a list that persuades a man who thinks he cannot be moved. You tell them to keep a bag ready, not because they should flee, but because being ready is a way to say to fear, you are not in charge here. The room smells of chalk and wool and the wonderful musk of children who have run farther than they should have before lessons. Laughter slips in through the window as easily as air. On the wall you hang a bit of cloth on which a careful hand has stitched a sentence. Only one. Only this. Keep your name. The girls read it aloud until they know why it matters. Then they forget it is there, because they have it inside them. The day comes when the harbor glitters like hammered metal, and a procession climbs the hill that has seen more processions than any city deserves. Men carry banners that have learned to be heavy. Women carry baskets they have taught their bodies to lift without anger. You and Theodore stand in a shadow that has sheltered older lovers and younger ghosts. The ceremony at the top is not yours and never was. It pays for itself with noise. You watch until your eyes tire. You go home because you prefer to be where the real city counts its coins and cooks its food. At the door, a boy glossed with sweat brings a message. A friend has died with the swiftness of a candle that looked steady and then went. You sit. The room shrinks. You smell rosemary from a shelf where sachets keep moths honest. You press your palms flat on the table and remember to breathe. Grief arrives like a guest who knows your house well. It takes the chair near the window. It stays as long as it needs to. You let it be. When it rises and leaves, it looks back from the threshold and nods. You nod too. You plant something for her in the courtyard. Not a cypress. A handful of mint that will invade everything if you do not respect it. You promise to respect it. The first new leaves are small and smooth and fierce, and when you pinch one and rub it between finger and thumb, your skin wakes and says yes. In the last light of a day that began with a clerk's impatience and ended with a neighbor singing a lullaby in a key you cannot find, you walk the line of the roof. The sea breathes. The city turns on its other side. You think of nothing in particular. The thought arrives anyway. You were a gift no one had the right to give. You became a person who learned to give herself. In the measure of such exchanges, you have made a fortune. This is the account of a child sealed to a throne and an old man sealed to his conviction. It is the account of a city that kept it so by remembering the difference between ceremony and bread. It is the account of a woman who learned that consent is the only crown, the only liturgy that does not taste of ash. The facts can be checked and should be. The disputed points will always be disputed. What survives beyond footnotes is a plain truth that refuses to grow ornate. Girls are not treaties. Cities are not trophies. Dignity is not a favor to be granted by rooms where men like to hear their names. Picture this one last time. Imagine a candle lit by a hand that answers to itself. A table with enough bread to make a morning. A door a woman closes when she chooses to leave and opens when she chooses to return.